Across America, protests are raging. Around the world, there are protests around this, and people are still dealing with the pandemic, which is still very much a concern. And so, of course, this was the perfect moment for author J.K. Rowling to start attacking trans people. So this is what she had to say in a tweet. She's talking about an article about trans rights, and she says, people who menstruate, she's quoting, I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumben, Wimpund, Woomud, opinion, creating a more equal post-COVID-19 world for people who menstruate. So what is bothering her today is that they use the expression people who menstruate rather than trying to pretend that trans women don't exist. J.K. Rowling, incredibly wealthy person, really tuned in to what's going on around the world.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. This article that she brings up isn't even about trans rights. She's just mad that the phrase
You're right.
people
It's
who
not.
menstruate was used. Yeah, so it's even more
Right.
sort of like searching for a reason to be upset. And that's the thing. It's like when it comes to trans rights and inclusivity and language inclusivity, like if you're mad that people are using people who menstruate instead of women, then that's on you. Like that, when you get mad at inclusivity, you're kind of you're like two hops away from the people who are like, well, James Bond isn't white. You could never have Idris Elba. Inclusivity is wrong. You know, you're just there. And listen, I get she doesn't want us to not ever use the word women again. But trans rights and trans inclusivity has nothing to do with abolishing the word women. In fact, it has to do with sort of expanding our definitions of women. And she's, and again, it's a very okay boomer moment from J.K. Rowling. And I also, last point, if we want to expand the definition of people who menstruate, like if I want to like get some sympathy from more people about what it is to menstruate, like don't take that away from me. Like that's a good thing. That helps all women out, right? It's like, yeah, people who menstruate. Because some men menstruate. So it's like I want more of that. I don't want less of that. I want more people to understand what it's like to bleed every month.
I agree. I will just say that she appears to be one of there's a class of people. And they may not realize this is true of them, but psychologically, perhaps the most distinctive thing about them is that the trans community, the trans experience, breaks their brain.
Yes.
And there are some people that they'll never get past that. And so
this
she
is someone
keeps
who
coming back
writes
to this.
about mythical creatures all the time.
She writes about goblins and stuff.
She writes about goblins.
Which I respect. I want a career where I write about goblins. But like, yeah, her and like you watch Ben Shapiro. That guy talks about the trans community more than literally any trans person I've known in my life. Like there are just some people who it gets in their brain and they can't stop thinking about it. They will never talk to an individual from the community to understand it. They don't want that. Because it's sort of like hate watching. They just want to think about it and dwell on it and attack it. And it bothers them so much that this group isn't being openly attacked anymore. And the thing is, J.K. Rowling, she thinks of herself, obviously, as everyone does. Nobody is the villain of their own story. She went on to say, the idea that women like me, who've been empathetic to trans people for decades, yeah, I'm really getting that, feeling kinship because they're vulnerable in the same way as women, i.e. to male violence, hate trans people because they think sex is real and has lived consequences, is nonsense. It's not up to you. You don't get to say what qualifies as empathy for a community you're not a part of. And that is asking you, stop attacking us constantly. It's not up to you. It's not up to me. It's not up to Francesca. It's up to them to say what qualifies as empathy.
And being triggered by an article that uses the phrase people who menstruate is not empathetic at all. I read the entire article.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason it's an article about, providing menstrual like services and necessities during COVID-19, right? Getting like free access to tampons, pads, etc. And then it mentions, women, trans people, and other non-binary people who menstruate. That's it. That's the only reference. It really wasn't about trans people. And so when you're triggered like that, once again, the problem is you.
Yeah. And I want to read just a few. This obviously took over Twitter. I want to read just a few of the responses to it. Some serious, some not. The first not serious, Cam Kasky tweeted, "Deletus tweeto," which I just thought was great. It's basically a spell. I know you don't read it, but it's pretty good. And then some were incredibly serious. So one individual said, "I decided not to kill myself because I wanted to know how Harry's story ended. For a long time, that was all that kept me alive. Until I met my husband who helped me learn to love myself and to want to live. You just insulted him to my face. I hate you." And there were so many people with things like that. And obviously, look, her attacks against the trans community is not the only issue. You know, her weird co-opting of the gay experience to imply that a character that was never explicitly gay was gay to get cred, even though you never actually did it in the books, let alone the bizarre racial stereotyping and anti-Semitic stereotyping in Harry Potter. Look, I love Harry Potter. I think the books are great, but they obviously have some massive blind spots that she continues to refuse to admit. I want to say just one more thing. While she obviously has some issues, Hermione Granger years ago wore a shirt that just said trans rights are human rights. And so not everyone's a villain in this story. Emma Watson is awesome.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.